Hi, so I am David Garrison. I work at National Grid as a principal data architect, which on a given day means I do stuff with data. I'm also a Snowflake expert, data superhero, VIP program, whatever you want to call it. I run the Boston Snowflake user group. I do a lot of stuff with them. That's how I ended up in this position in the first place. But this particular project is a bit of a case study. I don't have a lot of numbers and charts, but it's more of the story that we went through. I'll switch over to the general structure of this. I'm going to give some context for the problem statement, the business problem that we were trying to solve by bringing in HighByte, go over a little bit about how we implemented that, and then get into what's next and what we're still trying to work through. I'm going to mostly stay not too technical. If we get into technical questions later, great, but I'm just trying to kind of stay business perspective for the most part. So to start with, we have the old pipeline. So this is what we've had set up for, I'm not sure how many years at this point, at least 5 or 6. So we have up here, we've got data coming in from the world. This is assets, devices, things that have measurements. So a meter on your house, a circuit with voltages, a substation recloser, a bunch of different devices that all have different measurements. Some of them much more frequent than others, some of them every second, some of them every hour. And so real quick run through, we would bring that data in, run through some ETL processes to interpolate it and add context to that before doing a big batch job that would bring that into Snowflake. This in theory ran hourly, but more likely was every couple of hours, and then it would fail and then have to get reloaded. So there were a lot of headaches with this. And so the business complaints that we were getting kind of regularly is we only had 60,000 assets that were making it all the way into Snowflake. Actually, only 60,000 getting into this store here. And they want real-time data. These are users who are doing things like short-term forecasting. So they want to be able to know how much electricity is, being consumed and produced on the grid so that we can buy and sell and manage our business. So the more close to real time we can get that, the better. And in Snowflake is where we have all of the context and connections to other systems and other groups within the company. So getting that into Snowflake is really something we've been needing for a while. And another problem here is that in this big pipeline, they were doing aggregations and that interpolation, and that's great for some use cases, but not for others. For some use cases, we actually need the raw data, and by the time it was here, that wasn't even available to send into Snowflake. So there were a lot of different improvements we wanted to make. And also this whole pipeline was really difficult to make changes to. It would take weeks to add a new asset in here when it was needed. So this last April, May, we started the project of adding HighByte into this mix. So we can call this the new pipeline. The old one is still running, at least currently. We're going to eventually try to get off of that. But adding HighByte into this mix, not going to go too into detail here, but we are pulling directly from our source database. I'll just kind of refer to this as our source. And this is still a batch because this doesn't have capacity for streaming. But a nice thing with HighByte, and if you want to get an overview of the HighByte internals, you can talk to the sales engineer here. I'm not going to go into that too much, but this allows for us to take those batches and turn them into a stream. So this arrow here is a stream into Snowflake, which allows for much lower latency in Snowflake. based on how Snowflake brings in data. When it's done in batches here, there's extra latency on bringing it in, but this really helps us reduce our latency by having a stream here. So we've been able to, by putting this pipeline in here, pretty quickly jump up to about 10 times more assets from what we had before. We want to get this up into eventually up to like 2 million, which shouldn't be a problem. HighByte scales much more effectively than the old pipeline. That streaming also allows us to get under 15 minutes latency from a record, showing up in our source system all the way to querying it in Snowflake. And just using streaming at all at National Grid has been a big jump up in like, hey, we're doing real data movement, moving towards real-time use cases. And then we're doing more of our mapping and management of that asset, contextualization in Snowflake, which is where we have a lot of that data anyways. And of course, HighByte is just easier to update than the old system. All right, I'm going through pretty quick, but I think that's okay since I started a little late. So we just got this deployed yesterday, or at least approved for deployment yesterday. We're kind of in the process of deploying it right now. But when we were testing, because this is, I'm not paid or sponsored by HighByte in any way, shape, or form, so I have no qualms with telling you the issues we ran into. The very first time when we turned this on in test, trying to get some production data in our test environment, this query overloaded our source database and took down a whole bunch of this. That wasn't HighByte's fault, but definitely was an oops. So increasing the capacity of these servers was not a huge headache, but was certainly the first issue we ran into. The next thing that we ran into was not something we expected. Back when this pipeline was running hourly, we already had low enough or high enough latency that we didn't have issues with backfilling and gaps in our data because it was already hours delayed anyways. Now that we are pulling data with 15 minutes latency, we have noticed that this server doesn't always have the most up-to-date data. There's actually records here that might get created at 1 o'clock and not make it into here until 1:20. And now we're pulling it into Snowflake. Because our latency is actually smaller than that gap, we're seeing gaps in Snowflake. And so the fact that this has been a fast enough pipeline has exposed the fact that there's upstream bottlenecks that we weren't even aware of, which has been a big technical piece that we've been trying to figure out. And we're trying to solve this from a couple of different angles. We're trying to get more data moving more quickly here. There's a whole team that's on this, so trying to coordinate with them. And we're also trying to switch this into change data capture, which we've had some technical hiccups with, and this is what we're working with HighByte on right now. But if we can get change data capture going here, then it means even if a record shows up here 20 minutes late, then the next time that pipeline runs, it'll still get picked up and moved into Snowflake. But it has meant that we need to redefine all of our SLAs. We can't promise that we have data that's 15 minutes latency when our source data doesn't even have 15 minutes latency. So even if we can solve some of these problems on the HighByte side, there's like the business issue of we've promised 15 minutes latency and we can't provide that. So these are more business issues than anything technical, but has certainly made for an interesting process in trying to make those negotiations. And I'm probably missing a bullet point that I was going to talk about, but what's next? This guy was generated or was suggested by the AI generation. I just love that this just says statistics, and these sticky notes are profit, balance, and interactive text, which is just I had to leave it in. Anyways. So what we're working on right now is improving those upstream bottlenecks, getting those CDC pipelines working, and then managing those expectations, trying to communicate across business units. And honestly, we've kind of taken an approach of if you build it, they will come. We still have that old pipeline running. A lot of the business units are still using that. Some of them are still querying it from those upstream data sources directly. And so there's a transition. Once we now have this data available in Snowflake, we're trying to make these moves to actually get people using it so we can deprecate the old process. We're only just starting on that. It takes a lot of time for a big company with sensitive data to make those shifts and really trust the new system. So that's going to take time itself, but I'm hopeful we can get there. And the last thing here is now that we have a streaming use case, I'm trying to really open up the question to other teams to say, hey, we're doing streaming now. What other streaming use cases can we start bringing in? We've proved that we can do it. So even if it's completely unrelated teams, we want to start making that more of a standard use case, a standard paradigm. And get other Pi sources, asset sources. We have gas teams where this is only on electric so far, but there's gas assets in the world too. They have meters and data in the same way, so we want to get them integrated as well. So there's a lot of different ways that we're kind of trying to eventually expand this, but we just deployed it yesterday, so maybe getting a little ahead of myself on that, but those are the goals and where we're going next. I did manage to march through this pretty quickly, but hopefully that can help us get a little bit back on schedule. But I am happy to answer some questions. I know I was staying very high level, so happy to get into more technical details either now or offline. Yeah, hi.
All right, so I'm trying not to ask the question if you could replace Pi with something, so I'll say it more generically. If you could replace something in your architecture by snapping your fingers, what would it be?
That's a fair question. I'd certainly love to just get rid of that Matillion piece and get people jumped onto this new paradigm. A lot of the hesitance to move on to that is this is what we've done for the last 5-10 years, and that carries a lot of momentum at National Grid. So getting a jump on that deprecation side of things is really where I would be looking. I think that's the main thing that I'd love to see happen kind of right now, but will take a while.
You talked about the surprise of the fact that the Pi archive server, etc., couldn't handle the load when it was now pulling directly. Can you talk a little bit about, projects this large with this much data? They're notoriously difficult to simulate, have a test environments, qualification environments, et cetera, especially in the life sciences, that's true too. And I've had similar experiences where we've tried to scale out MQTT solutions to 50 sites, and suddenly it's like, hey, we can't keep up with all the data, or the one server goes down. It takes so much to reboot and rebirth things you didn't expect. Have you learned anything? Do you fight battles with folks to get the right resources?
We've had to fight a lot of battles on that front. So yeah, as you said, it's really hard to simulate this and test. That's why our test HighByte pipeline and test Snowflake environment was pulling from our production source data, which is exactly why that got brought down and caused trouble. Our source, we have a source development environment, but it doesn't get new data, so there was no way to test a stream coming out of it. So back to that question, if there was a magic switch, I would love to be able to have a development environment for this. That's been one of the bigger headaches for us and has required a lot of negotiation on even just like, hey, when can we test our pipeline? Going and talking to that team and saying like, is midnight on a Sunday okay? Like, is that going to take everything down if something goes wrong?
I guess the good news is that as you start to build out these new use cases and start to solicit to the business, hey, what else can we do? People realize the capabilities are there. Then it becomes a more iterative process where you can justify, hey, we need to have a continuous environment here where we can modify and truly have a data ops, like DevOps, right?
Yeah, we've definitely opened up a lot of communication doors in the process of this to help make those changes a little more quickly. They're still slow moving, but I see a couple more hands.
Yeah. Hey, David, just a quick question. You mentioned short-term, long-term forecasting as the first use cases you've taken down. What are the other ones that are swirling around in your business?
It's a good question. A lot of them, those are the two big ones that we talk to on a daily, weekly basis. The others that are kind of being tossed around are like GIS, relating this data to GIS maps and like substation digital twin maps, so that we have a 3D representation of all of the devices, and that's not so much tied into all this measurement data, which is the part that we really need the streaming for, but it is tied into having the contextualization piece of which devices. There's like a device hierarchy of this device is on this pole, which is at this substation, and having those all connected together, and then tying that in with our geospatial data. So there's a lot of overlap with the types of data that they need. Those are the other big ones that we are planning on getting into. But we have 6 or 7 different teams that are all at least interacting with this data. So our customer team cares about meter readings, and tying that into customer data, will have the ability to help with their predictions, being able to give predictions to our customers, because a customer has a portal and they want to know when's the data going to be, or when's the power going to be back on. And that's not quite the same data, but there's a lot of connections there.
Sure. Okay. Awesome. Thanks.
So various.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
See, I like this format because I don't have to plan out talking about all these things. You guys can just bring the questions and talk about what we want to talk about, which is great.
Do you mind pulling up the architecture diagram? I was curious, you had a lot of assets. Was that all coming from one main Pi archive, or was that heavily distributed?
It is very unbalanced. There's probably... What we're currently getting in Snowflake is 60,000, and that's a relatively large chunk of the data that's actually coming in terms of measurements. The rest of these 700,000 assets, a lot of those are much lower frequency measurements. I kind of lost the thread of the question, but
is it one Pi that you're pulling from, or was it many Pis that you're pulling from?
It's 2. It's
Okay.
New England and New York. That's the division that we have on the Pi side of things. But yeah, the point I was getting at is they're unbalanced. So a lot of the data is coming from one single Pi historian.
Got it. The other question I had was, obviously, Pi, especially as a pretty full-featured historian, the way that organizations adopt it can be very different. And sometimes I like to say that Pi it either can be a flat list of data, or it can be a very complicated tree of data. Meanwhile, Snowflake is essentially a table, right? Can you talk about how your approach to kind of mapping that schema, or how you sort of approach balancing the world between process data and more of a tabular data warehouse?
The hierarchy, yeah.
Yep.
So this whole pipeline here, what this does is this asset framework piece is providing that contextualization, the hierarchy, connecting the devices. And so that was the benefit of the old pipeline, is that the data comes in here already has a lot of that context. Now that we're short-circuiting that, we are building our own hierarchy system in Snowflake that is built on top of what we'd already done in the past. So we've done some one-time uploads, and so we have, sure, it gets dumped into a table right off the bat, but then we have a transform process in here that is turning that into a hierarchy, so you can query it in a lot of different ways in Snowflake. And we've built an app on top of Snowflake so that our business users can actually go in and maintain it directly from Snowflake.
I guess, sorry, just one other thing, because I find this really fascinating. Did you do it more of like a narrow table format, or was it more wide? So if you had an asset that, say, had 5 attributes in it, would you build out wide tables, or do you elect to them more of in a narrow format?
It's relatively wide tables for asset information, and then very narrow tables for the measurements. Yeah. And I suppose we make it even wider by adding the hierarchy to it. So a single asset will actually have the whole hierarchy of like I said, this device is on this pole, which is on this structure or in this substation. So it's easy to look at to query a single record and search for a single device and have all that context.
No,
Yeah,
this is good.
That's probably more in the weeds than we should get into in this. No, it's okay. I'll answer questions until you kick me off. But
What's the percentage of the pipelines pumping in raw data versus aggregated data?
So this pipeline is almost all aggregated, at least in terms of like there's interpolation, and it's not crazy aggregation, but it's this is all aggregated, and this is pure raw data getting into Snowflake, and then in Snowflake we do the aggregations. So this is just raw measurement data. This single device had this many volts go through. I don't know what the measurements are on all the devices, but a single record here will be literally an ID and a number.
Yeah. Thank you.
So yeah, we've over the history of this whole project, that aggregation has happened in a few different places. Cool. Well, I'm seeing fewer hands now, so
Can I ask one?
yeah, please.
So thank you, first of all, for doing this. It's great. Can you offer everyone one piece of advice if they're getting started in the beginning and putting their data foundation in place, or doing a data pipeline transition like you've done? What's like a lesson learned that you feel like would be worth sharing?
Sure. Off the top of my head, for us, a lot of the conversations that we've kind of gotten to in the end have been around how we're going to, what these next steps are going to be. I kind of wish we had started on these next steps a little bit earlier, especially working with the business. I don't know if there's a real good one-size-fits-all answer for how my business translates into yours, but planning out that future. I mean, this goes back to the keynote, is getting started on that contextualization and thinking about, hey, if you're doing streaming, what else can you stream to? What other things can you start streaming? What other things can you start connecting together? Getting engaged in those conversations early is certainly helpful context to have when making any of these pipeline decisions. It's very kind of non-answer, but yeah.